1,000 people, including hundreds of children. The images from this massacre are sickening. Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. Others foaming at the mouth, gasping for breath. A father clutching his dead children, imploring them to get up and walk. On that terrible night, the world saw in gruesome detail the terrible nature of chemical weapons and why the overwhelming majority of humanity has declared them off limits.
Wow, the president painted a very grim and detailed picture of what these acts of chemical weapons violence look like in Syria. Mohamed, as a Syrian American, what's your reaction to the comments from the president?
First, he did a beautiful job with his address. He made a beautiful, brilliant job. But the problem is he needs to develop contingency plans. What I see it is missing from his speech. And just quick, let me go to the problems with Russia's proposal. Assad has not specifically endorsed the idea of eliminating its huge chemical weapons arsenal. Just to be clear about that.
What has he done?
So far, he just sent one of his ministry, Al-Muallim, to Moscow to propose to the Russians that we are ready to give our chemicals weapon, and he will not mention his biological chemical weapons. So here we're using the term chemical. Let us differentiate between chemical and biological chemical weapons that he's been building since 1982 in northern Syria and Halab, Aleppo, and Al-Sfira.
So essentially what you're saying is the type, like for example, a sarin, which has been the chemical weapon that has been detected in the most recent inspection, the most recent search, and the most recent intelligence reports, that would constitute a chemical weapon that they would be forced to yield. But you're saying that they have not agreed to yield other weapons. Wouldn't they all be sort of subsumed under the idea of chemical weapons, though? I mean,
then you are entering the Assad's arena. That is his game. He's been played a long time ago, since the 80s, his dad and his uncle and his family. So it's going to be really, if I put it this way in few words, we shouldn't take the Russian proposals to begin with. It was only the threat of force that got them to admit Assad's regime has chemical weapons. And now they want us to play Russians roulette. With that information, accepting their term of no force is blank shot, and the loaded part will hurt us the most. Believe me, we are rely on the Russians' terms to assess whether the chemical weapons are found or eventually destroyed. So really, we are entering another 3 years of violence in Syria.
Wow.
Seriously, this is how we see it. And average children in Syria, this is how they see it.
John, I want to bring you into the conversation. Critics have said that the Obama administration has been dithering and equivocating in its response to this brutal war in Syria. As a Syrian American, how do you think the U.S. has handled the response to the Syrian crisis, not just in the last month, but really over the protracted amount of time?
I may be in the minority, but I have a great deal of difficulty understanding why, as horrible as chemical weapons and their use is, why are we not putting this in a general context? Sure, the visual effects of seeing children and women and men and all that dying from the use of gas is totally intolerable and should be condemned by all possible means. But we have to keep in mind the fact that not only 1,400 people have been killed by chemical weapons, over 110,000 people have been murdered, and the country has been destroyed during the last 2 years. And somehow now suddenly our conscience is awakened to the fact that we have to do something to stop this monster from continuing the use of what we think is an unacceptable means of fighting a war. So I guess the point I'm making is I'm happy to see that there's some effort to try to respond to this international human crime, but at the same time we ought to put it in the general context of saying that what have we been doing the last 2 years while this guy was murdering 10,000-20,000 people every single Friday.
But John, does that make you skeptical of the president's intentions, and also how committed he will be to watching this play out in a way that benefits Syria? I mean, over the last month, essentially, the president has said that this isn't about stopping all of the humanitarian crimes in Syria, that this isn't about ousting Bashar al-Assad, that this is purely about stopping the expansion of chemical weapons and the use of chemical weapons. I mean, isn't that troublesome?
Of course. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it not only makes me skeptical, but it makes me totally embarrassed of the fact that we have a president who's very big on speeches, but doesn't really care. I mean, 2 years ago he said Bashar al-Assad should, he's not legitimate. He should be gone. What has he done to expedite the departure of the Assad? He hasn't done anything. I mean,
what would that look like, though, John? What would that look like? A lot of people have said this, that they want to see some type of intervention. Those same people often say they don't want weapon strikes or missile strikes, and that they don't want boots on the ground. What would an appropriate Obama response have looked like over the last 2 years?
I think a great section of the opposition, and perhaps a great portion of the inhabitants in Syria would not want the United States to directly intervene militarily into Syria. What I hold Obama responsible for is once he said that the regime is a dictatorial authoritarian regime and al-Assad should be gone. He should at the very least he should have gone and identified the moderate elements of the opposition and try to give them some genuine, significant support, and that's basically what they've asked for. The opposition forces have never really wanted or asked for a U.S. military intervention, but have been begging for over a year and a half or 2 years, begging for some military assistance. Give us some weapons. Give us some anti-tank, air power.
Right. It sounds like you're talking about not just sort of funneling weapons in through proxy groups, but also perhaps no-fly zones and other forms of non-missile-based intervention. And that's what a lot of people are saying here. In fact, I'm looking on Twitter right now. Zaid Benjamin tweets this, quoting Farah el-Atasi from the Syrian coalition. And he says, "We refuse the idea that a criminal is acquitted if he hands over the murder weapon." In other words, if Syria gives up chemical weapons, Selma, it's not enough for many people on the ground in Syria. What does the right kind of intervention look like?
Well, I mean, the right kind of intervention is not exclusively one type or another. I mean, the policy discussions that I've been seeing have been trying to put the diplomatic track aside from the humanitarian track, aside from the military track. And the problem, and this latest proposal from the Obama administration regarding going in only for the as a punishment or paying lip service to this red line regarding chemical weapons is part and parcel of that, or is endemic to that problem. I mean, the idea is that the United States has continuously kind of backed off of lines in terms of being genuinely committed to helping Syrians who are rising up against a dictator. We've seen the logic go from, well, we can't verify what went on, to, well, we need to see the opposition unite, and what is the alternative, to, well, we want to see condemnation of this atrocity from the coalition. And now this latest idea of, well, we can't arm you because we can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. So this has sent incredible mixed signals from the Obama administration. I mean, what is good enough for them to actually stand up and help the opposition?
So for you, the proper type of intervention is helping the opposition. Some would argue in the last year we've seen weapons come in through Jordan, weapons come in through Bahrain, that we've seen opposition aid. And that if any greater aid were to come to the strongest opposition forces, we'd be actually supporting opposition forces that are backed by al-Qaeda. And if they're backed by al-Qaeda, then we're right back where we started. So, I mean, I guess the question is, how do you back resistance groups without putting yourself in an even worse strategic position?
There's a way you can implement no-fly zone.
I'm sorry, Mohamed, say that again? Okay,
to be more effective.
Yeah.
The resolution should include a no-fly zone. Well, that stops Assad from, using our force, destroy innocent women and children every second in Syria.
And let's actually be clear about something. The Obama administration promised weapons in June, and they have not delivered on that yet. So I'm sorry.
The Obama administration has been big on talking and very short on delivering. I'm in contact with a number of sources in Syria, and they haven't received anything. They still are waiting. They say waiting and waiting and waiting, and nothing is coming in.
Well, there are fairly reliable reports that there are some weapons coming in through proxy sources but I agree that they're certainly not coming in at the rate or in the direction that the Obama administration has promised. Camille, I want to swing to you though. You're against the strike. You've been very clear about that, but you're also worried that if we don't strike, that it sends a signal to other countries like Iran that we aren't holding firm in our threats to attack, that essentially, as Obama said, we become an empty threat.
Add to that Hezbollah also, please. Don't forget Hezbollah, who is the troops on the ground in Syria fighting our people in Halab in northern Syria and Homs, middle of Syria. So it says, let me just bring something to your attention and to everyone, to our audience. We need to go back to the congressional resolution. If there's any way we combine the French proposal and mention Hickman map, right? If we can, any way we can put this proposal together to work it out. But again, there's no guarantee that is going to work.
No, absolutely.
We cannot enter Syria. Syria is in war today. How we are going to bring United Nations inside Syria?
No, absolutely. Mohamed, we have to run in a second, but I want to squeeze Camille in to make sure her voice is heard. Camille,
sorry.
First of all, where does the president go from here? Again, you talk about a need for intervention, or you're against the strikes, but you recognize the need for intervention, and you're worried about not looking weak in the global community, but particularly in relation to Iran. Sir, how do we tie all that together in a way that moves the ball forward?
Well, I see this whole episode as a prelude to Geneva. The United States and Russia have been trying to make Geneva happen. The main problem was the future role of President Assad or not. The Syrian army has been winning probably 70 or 80% of the battles the past 6 months, and the United States was not going to go to Geneva with its proxies appearing that week. After such a strike, the United States will walk into that conference hall very comfortable, because I find this at this point as United States versus Russia in the first place. I don't think what's happening in Syria is anything more than a small detail. It's what the United States and Russia are deciding. It's we're going back to something similar to the Cold War.
I was about to say, it sounds very much like a Cold War context. I have to run, guys, because Senator Rand Paul is about to offer his reaction to President Obama's speech. We're going to bring it all to you right here at HuffPost Live. Stay with us.